I'm guessing you're clicking onto this video for one particular family member or because you take a role in your family where you're the one that everyone comes to all the time with their needs. Because if it's just about saying no to a family member and they respect your needs and wants and you respect theirs and it just happens occasionally, then it's usually not a problem. So this is really about those situations where it gets really sticky and the situations in some form or another are repeated over and over. So if you imagine saying no in one of the recent situations where you would have wanted to say no, just imagine doing that. Let me know. Does that make you feel anxious or does it make you feel great? If you can picture yourself doing that, what feeling comes up? And let's say you could really imagine prioritizing your own needs, being authentic to yourself, taking care of what you know you need to take care of, but not what other people think you should take care of. If you really could feel that deeply and be able to say no guilt-free, wouldn't that be awesome? I'm guessing it sounds pretty good. There are many underlying causes for being unable to say no to a family member. And obviously, we can't cover all of them in a relatively short YouTube video, but I do think that the 4 points I'm going to cover today will help you a lot moving in this direction. So from a young age, we're usually taught to be nice to others, to consider others' feelings, right? To respect our parents, all sorts of things that, for the most part, are good sayings. But it does seem that in many families, this whole issue becomes very unbalanced, where there are those in the family who spend a lot of time taking care of the needs and wants of others, and some family members who don't do it at all. So within a family, it becomes very unbalanced. And probably if you're watching this video, in your own life, this has become unbalanced. Sometimes, yes, we absolutely have to sacrifice our needs for our loved ones, but not always, not to the point where it's really harming us, right? So this is about moving towards balance. So you can find lots of videos that are going to give you like the phrases that you need to say no to a family member. But I don't honestly think that's what this is about. This is about some of those deeper issues and what role you had in the family. So the first thing I want to talk about, in dysfunctional families, roles become very sort of rigid. People take on different responsibilities. And if you are someone who is the caretaker for your family or the competent one, and your role is to be the one who helps, then people are going to come to you with their not just needs, but their wants. And they might prioritize their wants over your needs. So this becomes ingrained from a very early age, and the pattern can be hard to change. And patterns within families are even more difficult to change than it is for an individual to change. So another thing to keep in mind as you think about the role that you had in your family that might be leading to this problem of not being able to say no to a family member is that we get our self-esteem from our roles, or we get our sense of self, I should say, from our roles. So if your role was to be the competent one, there's a really good self-esteem in that, right? So you might actually be somehow attached to that role. But now that you're an adult, you're really beginning to see the downside. And again, moving towards balance is going to benefit your overall mental, physical, emotional health. So here's some things to think about. Identify your soft spots. Is saying no to a family member tied to a particular family member? Why, right? What's that person's role? What was your role? Is it tied to some type of should? So I'm going to share a story here about somebody I know, and she is about 70, and so is her husband. And she was telling me how hard she's working, and I was amazed. I was like, wow, I wouldn't want to be working that hard at my age, and definitely not in a couple of years, right? So I asked her more, and she basically was on a theme of, I have to. So, okay, she has to, right? Didn't know, I was not in a counseling role to her. So we were just sort of having a conversation. But then it eventually came out that she and her husband are financially helping an adult child who is not disabled, just sort of struggling and having a hard time. But they've been helping this child for a long time. And they also help one of their siblings. Again, adults who were not like disabled or handicapped or having some real concrete reason that they couldn't be supporting themselves, but simply more out of this sense of responsibility and obligation and that's my role. And I just kind of threw a couple of questions in there like, but you're telling me you really want to retire or you really want to cut back on your work and you can't do so, and yet you're helping these other able-bodied adults. So clearly a soft spot, right? So very nice, generous, wonderful, but at what expense? To be working 7 days a week and feel like you can't retire, but basically you're supporting 3 households. So again, I'm not talking about those situations where maybe you have to help out a relative who really is disabled or temporarily help somebody who is overall a very responsible person but got into a tough spot. Like, those usually are not the situations where people worry about how do I say no. If the people are generally responsible and know how to budget their money and know how to take care of themselves, then they get into a tough spot. Sure, help them out, right? But that's not where you get stuck doing this forever and ever. And then it feels like, oh, well, this is just the way it is, and I have to do this forever. So let me give you some practical ideas with this situation in mind of what you could do. But basically to sit your adult child down and say, look, I know we've been helping you out for a number of years, but we're both 70 years old now. We have to really start cutting back. And we don't want to end up old and dependent on you. We don't want to end up like totally wiping out our bank accounts, and then we have to rely on you to take care of us. I don't want to put that burden on you. But for me to not put that burden on you, I'm going to have to stop helping you out. So you could give them a time frame. You could say, okay, we're going to cut back gradually, like give the person a chance to make adjustments in their lifestyle or all of that kind of stuff. But basically, you just sit down and you have an honest conversation about it, understanding that your needs matter. And there's even a question here that if you are helping other able-bodied adults that much in an ongoing way, are you really doing them a favor? I'm not so sure. All right. I'm wondering if this one's going to get a lot of controversy and pushback, but let me know. Put your comments below. Let me know what you think about that example. But that would be one where the soft spot was tied to the role that each of these people, right, this woman and her spouse, had from childhood. They were the competent ones, the responsible ones, and they never shifted that pattern. All right, the third point I want to make today is about the combination of saying no and boundaries. Now, they're not exactly the same thing, right? Like, yes, saying no is a boundary, but boundaries are somewhat of a broader topic. But the piece I want to talk about here is about enforcing your own boundaries. Because what often keeps us stuck or feeling like, well, we have to, or the other person won't even let me say no, right? I hear that a lot. I try to say no and they won't accept no. Well, if your no is your no, it's got to be your no. And your enforcement is the enforcement. So we always want the other person to understand and acknowledge and agree with the fact that we have the right to say no. We do. It's normal, it's natural, it's great. But if somebody has shown over and over again that they don't have high regard for our needs or wants, that they don't listen to our no's, that they don't really care, then we have to stop wanting that to be the thing that changes the situation. So I have 2 examples for you on this one. So one of them is someone I know who has 3 young children, and she works from home. And her sister lives in a neighboring town, not very far away. And her sister has 4 children. Her sister doesn't work, but obviously having 4 kids is a lot. Having 3 kids is a lot, right? So let's call the woman with the 3 kids Anne, because it'll make the story a little bit easier here. Not her name, and I've changed details to protect confidentiality. But Anne's sister regularly just shows up in her driveway, drops her 4 kids off, and says, I got to go run an errand, takes off, and leaves the kids there. So now Anne doesn't just have 3 kids and her work to deal with after school. She has 7 kids, right? So she's multiple times asked her sister not to do that, explained to her sister, I'm sorry, I'm overwhelmed. I have my own work I have to get done. I have my own kids. I can't take your kids all the time. I'll help out once in a while, but I really can't do it regularly. And I also can't do it when it's unannounced. And she has said that. So she's basically said a no over and over and over. And it doesn't matter. Her sister still shows up in her driveway, lets the 4 kids out of the car and says goodbye and drives away. All right. What does Anne want? Anne wants her sister to be reasonable. Anne wants her sister to care about her. I think just knowing the facts we know to date, we could say, well, her sister's not being reasonable and her sister is not exhibiting any kind of caring behavior here. So if we simply accept that that's the case, that her sister's not going to change, then what's the choice? So if Anne's no is a no, nope, can't take your kids on no notice and not every day, not 6 times a week, right? Then that's Anne's no to enforce. So how does she enforce it? That's what everybody wants to know because she has said it, but the sister just shows up. Okay, so the way you enforce it is you gather up your nieces and nephews and you say, nope, you guys all, you got to get back in mom's car. So sorry, I can't take you today. Bye. You buckle them into their car seat. You don't let them get out of the car. Now, this is awkward. It's uncomfortable, right? That's why Anne doesn't want to do it. But who's really making the situation awkward and uncomfortable? The sister. So the sister already knows that Anne isn't going to do something that creates conflict. Anne doesn't really like to have situations that are awkward and uncomfortable, and the sister is taking advantage of it. So finding a way to put a smile on your face, maintain your no, be nice to your nieces and nephews and say, can't wait to go out for ice cream with you on Saturday. Bye, right? It's yours to enforce. I also think that when you first have kids and you have young kids, it might be the first time in your life that you really have way too much on your plate. Like you really can't keep doing everything you've done for other people. So I do think a lot of these boundary issues come up when you have young kids. So the last story I want to share with you, which also illustrates some of these points. Jim is married, 1 young kid, and a second on the way. And his in-laws don't respect his and his wife's decisions around their kids. Now, if you have young kids, you're probably going, oh, I know what this is like, because definitely the different generations have different approaches. But Jim and his wife really like to keep their kid on a regular schedule, regular bedtime, regular times to eat. And I agree that that's pretty healthy. When you can do that, it's a very good thing for a kid and their emotion regulation. And Jim really wants to stick to it. But when he goes to his in-laws, they never stick to it. And he has told them a number of times, no, you can't keep her up past her bedtime. And they don't listen. And Jim and his wife have talked about it. And Jim has said, look, it's really awkward for me to be the one who enforces this. I really would like you to stand up to your parents. And his wife agrees. But then when she gets to the house, she doesn't. She doesn't do it. So that makes Jim mad, resentful. He's mad and resentful at his in-laws. Not a good situation, right? So what are Jim's choices, right? They go to visit the in-laws a couple of weekends a year. When they're there and they get the kid all ready for bed, then Grandpa comes in and he's like, nope, we got to play another game, or the house has loud music on. His in-laws make fun of them for wanting to keep their kids on a regular schedule. So that makes Jim not want to visit at all. And he keeps telling his wife, I'm not going to visit them anymore, which of course doesn't make her happy because she does want her parents to have a relationship with their kids, right? These situations are complicated. But it doesn't have to go all or nothing. There are other options here. So what are Jim's options? They could stay at a hotel nearby. Now, that might be awkward. Families don't always like that. They may like bug you, but you could say, you know what? We've tried a few times. It may not be important to you, but it's important to us to keep our kid on a regular schedule. And I think the best way we can do that will make everybody happy, is that you guys can do whatever you want in the evenings. You can keep your music loud. You can do whatever you want. And we'll stay nearby, local motel, and we'll see you again in the morning for breakfast. So, okay, you might right now be, okay, well, how is this saying no, right? Because again, we want to say no and have the other person listen, respond, and respect it. But if that's not happening, you need to enforce your own no. And then, of course, there's another option for Jim, which would be like, okay, 4 weekends a year, my kids are off schedule. I just am going to know it's going to happen. because that's what's going to happen if I stay there. So it just makes your choices a little bit more clear. Again, let me know if that was a helpful example. I know that these situations can be awkward, right? So the people who are sort of beginning to stand up for their boundaries and their no's can feel super awkward. And generally, those people who repeatedly cross our boundaries, those people who won't take no for an answer or completely ignore the fact that we're saying no, they don't really care about things getting awkward, or they know you're going to smooth things over. So why does it have to be your role to avoid awkward situations? Awkward situations, they're just awkward. Oh well, we all get over them, right? And really, they're the ones who are making the situation awkward, not you. So saying no to a family member, again, this is a complex, complicated topic. But knowing that your needs matter is critical. Identifying where these patterns came from, like what beliefs did you develop that made you into the people pleaser in these situations? What negative core belief is under that? So I work with this concept of the negative core belief in a lot of different ways, but I think that the way that might be most useful for you right now is that I have a quiz on boundary style that incorporates this concept of the negative core belief. It actually identifies what your positive core belief is about yourself that might be causing some boundary problems. So remember when I talked about the fact that we do get self-esteem sometimes from the roles we develop in families, right? That positive core belief can actually be holding us back because it has a flip side. It has a negative core belief that goes with it. I talk about both of those in the answer I'll give you after you take the quiz. So I'll put the link for the quiz here on the screen. It's also in the description, a clickable link. I think you'll find it super useful, and I'd love to know. Let me know what you think of it. And remember, this is about balancing your needs, wants, and desires with your family members. And when we think about able-bodied adults, the best person to take care of your own needs is you, right? And the best person to take care of their needs is them, unless there's sort of a mutually agreeable dynamic, which is wonderful. And that's not what usually causes people to watch this video. All right, let me know what you think, and I'll see you next week.